So we're at week 2 for Journey to Oneness, and I am Kelly Messick. I'm on the pastoral staff at Vineyard Columbus, and I get to do this all year long. I get to help couples, either committed dating and engaged, move toward marriage, with a coaching program where we train couples or married couples to coach couples that are moving toward marriage. And so it's a really great program that we have. And these classes, as well as helping folks actually on their weddings. So what a great life this has been. So you all are here because you are in a committed dating relationship or engaged to be married. And so last week, we talked quite in detail about creating a shared identity. And I think most of it was concerned with our spiritual lives, creating a shared identity, one of equality, respect, and love with one another. And so that has been recorded. And if you signed up today through Mindy, she would have sent you that, and you can watch that whenever you can. There was also a pre-class video for tonight. There will be one pretty much, I think about 4 out of the 6 weeks, there'll be a pre-class video. So maybe kind of getting in mind for doing that. So tonight, our topic is what we call self-protective vows. And if any of you are those creative wordsmith type people, I would love to have a new phrase for this, because vows don't seem very common in our world today, but they really do happen. We just aren't always aware of it. And so as I go through the material tonight, and maybe as you share with one another or share with us in the class, you might be able to all of a sudden see or recognize, maybe understand something you've been noticing for a while. And I just want you to know this is true about every person. And that's why the course is in this class. Class is in this course. So without any more delay, I want to just start by going over a quick review of the pre-class video. And that is both for those who did see it. If you're like me, a review is always nice, but also if you didn't, you'll get a kind of an idea of where we're going. So in the video, I talked about the idea that we have things happen in our lives that cause us to make decisions about life. And often we do this outside of the will of God. So whether we're aware of it or not, it is typically outside of the will of God, simply because we're not thinking about God's faithfulness or what He has for us. We're thinking about protecting ourselves. So again, perfectly normal, understandable human behavior. We are human beings. This is what we do. If you've had any training in brain and neuroscience and things like that, you know that our brains are hardwired to do these things. But when we become aware of them, we can begin to replace those kind of hardwired reactions, decisions we made when we were young or younger, children, or maybe in previous relationships and friendships. We can begin to say, that is not the way that I don't want to live my life out of that anymore. And we start to change what we believe about it. So when I teach this class, I always say, I've been thinking about this for about 15 years now. And I would tell you that I'm still working on mine. Okay. So it's not the kind of thing that you're aware of it and then, okay, it's gone. It really does take intentional living, just like any part of Christianity takes intentionality If I want to draw close to God, if God is inviting me to draw near to him, it's not just downloaded and done. It's an ongoing, lifelong journey, adventure, I would say, because we'll never know all there is to know about God. And probably not about ourselves either. So when you think about the way that you are in life, the experiences you've had in relationships, and I would say close relationships, maybe with a parent, siblings, employer, boyfriend, girlfriend, any kind of romantic relationship, when you consider the experiences you've had, you might notice kind of what I call an autopilot. It's a way of being that has been set up, that you have kind of set up, or the world has set up for you. Either way, it's been set up, and you find yourself being like that, kind of cyclically or over and over again. One of the things that comes to mind is if, somebody might say, well, this is just how I am. I get loud when I get passionate, and the people around you are kind of going, what? I don't know what to do about that. Or maybe you're the kind of person that shuts down. Somebody gets upset and you just go, you're gone. Or you just kind of go inside and you become quiet, and the people around you are saying, what's wrong? And you say nothing. Or maybe they don't notice at all. Maybe it's just the way you've always been. And so inside of you is a well of emotion or feelings that you aren't able to share. So intimacy suffers. There are lots of different ways. Those are just two examples, maybe on the opposite sides of the spectrum. But if you think of something, like one of the things that I'll tell you, one of the things that I started noticing around in my 40s was that I was very quick to come to the aid of everyone that I knew. And I was always concerned about what they needed and then whether they were okay, happy, especially okay with me. And so I worked really hard all of the time. And around in my 40s, I started feeling like it wasn't coming back to me very often, or people were still not happy with me. And I can't even stand listening to myself say this, but I started to become resentful. And that was new for me, right? So when I started realizing that I was resentful to other people for something that they never asked me to do, for the most part, I thought that it was my position. It was for me to do. It felt like I could actually make a difference in people's lives. So I asked about the Enneagram last week. The Enneagram would call that the helper. And when I realized that that was my way of seeking connection in the world, I didn't like it at all. And so I set about to begin working on that. But it has been a long haul because I have long-term relationships. I told you that I've been married for 30 years. I have a 29-year-old son. I've been in my job for a long time. And so I really believe that God has slowly helped me to grow, especially in awareness, and then also in the ability to not ask others to take responsibility for what is mine. So that's a quick intro. And so thinking about that, that's what I would kind of like this night to be, a time when you allow insight to rise up. And the other thing that I really think is important is that we not be thinking about what our and what our partner's vows are. So you may think it, but the conversation tonight that we're going to have, I would like it to stay about you sharing what you're noticing about you and what's happening. Now, it may include the other person. You may say, you know, when you say this to me, I see myself feeling this way. You can include the other person, but not, what we don't want to do is focus on the other person's need to grow or change tonight. Can I get some nods? Yeah. Okay. Nobody's going to nod at me. In class, sometimes I get more nods. So a deeper dive into our family of origin or our early lives. And one thing that I really want to focus on is thinking about two different kinds of things. Do you remember we talked about roles in our families? There's also the idea of independence and closeness. So relationally, I may really love to be close to people. Not may, I do. I like closeness. That's how I experience love. Other folks are very independent and don't need as much closeness. And so when we think about our families of origin or just how we are, we can kind of get a handle on where we are on that spectrum. So for instance, maybe your family was intensely competitive or independent, and they had very high standards. What we want to do tonight is to say, maybe that was your family, or maybe you experienced it that way. And maybe it wasn't even talked about, but everyone knew what the standard was and what was expected of them. So here's some things some vows that might come out of that. I must succeed or I will be rejected by my family. Or I can't ever admit that I'm struggling or wrong. Asking for help shows weakness. It's up to me to make sure that there's peace in our home. I'm the only one who can keep mom or dad from flying off the handle. That's an odd phrase. From losing their temper. Or I'm the only one that can get mom or dad to engage with us. You see, there's this decision, this kind of experience that's had that reinforces this idea that this is going to be my job. And so whether or not that would be highly competitive and also closeness, wanting closeness. So when you think about when you're listening to me talk or when you're talking to one another tonight, I want you to be looking at it kind of with a curiosity. That's going to come up a lot in our class. So again, we're going to go back to how the roles may have stopped us. Okay, so think about where you might feel stuck or stopped. Where they worked when you were a child, but now they're kind of backfiring. They're not working anymore. Like the way I explained mine. Everyone thought of me as their best friend, their closest friend, the most kind person, all of those kinds of things. And then as I got older, 30s and 40s, I wasn't feeling it so much. I started to really see where it wasn't going to keep working for me. So that's one of the things that can tell you if something is a vow. If it used to work to protect you, if it worked in childhood, so that you felt like you belonged or that you were safe, then that would be something that would be considered a vow. So in marriage, you guys, you know what's coming. You both bring your vows into your relationship, and then they become what I call the perfect storm. So now maybe you have the same one. I probably should say, if they are very different, it's the perfect storm. One of the stories I love to tell that's a simple one is that our pastor, our founding pastor, Rich Nathan, and his wife came from opposite backgrounds. He was from Manhattan, New York, Jewish family, very boisterous and loud. and everybody talked at once. And she came from a Lutheran family in Illinois that never spoke up about anything. And so immediately in their marriage, it was that he was just talking. He wasn't yelling. She would say, why are you yelling at me? And he would say, I'm not yelling. This is just how I talk. But it was a while before they were able to understand one another. And, like if he was up here and she was down here, maybe they had to do this, right? That would be a simple one. A more complex would be when folks create ways of being, or they discover ways of being in their relationship that and they don't know how to get past them. One of my examples for my husband is I call it the perfect storm. We were about 7 years into marriage, and my background was that my father left when I was 6 years old, and there were lots, I think I mentioned last week, there were lots of fights. My husband was that his mom and dad argued all the time, and that people started yelling and got mean with each other. I don't think there was ever, I know there was never any physical abuse, but it was quite a verbal dialogue. So my dad left, his parents said things they didn't mean. And so we would have arguments, and he would shut down and go in the other room. I'm pretty sure I told some of this last week, but what I would do is start cleaning and slamming cupboards because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stand the thought that he was upset with me, that he might leave. And he thought that he wanted to not say anything that would hurt me, so he went to be by himself. But another wonderful thing about my husband is that he always comes to apologize. And so I was in the kitchen doing the dishes, slamming cupboards, and he came up behind me, and with an original insight, one he hadn't known before, he said, "I'm so sorry, hon. I always feel like you're going to take something from me. You're going to take something away from me." And as soon as he said that, I realized, and I'm always afraid that you're not going to give me what I need. So can you see why I call that the perfect storm? The both of us unconsciously thinking of these things from our pasts, and also just from our temperaments, and then finally realizing it and being able to say to each other, no, I don't want to take anything from you. And yes, I do want to give you what you need. I can't, the thing is that you can't always be that for the other person. God, we need to look to God for that. But that awareness set us on a path to doing and living and sharing very differently with one another. So when we think about those ways that we have in the past felt in relationships, and maybe you even talked about past relationships. I think a lot of couples do. You don't want to spend too much time thinking about it, but we can say, when I had this experience, it caused this. The other person, if you can think about it like this too, your partner is not responsible for what happened to you. When we come together, when we start dating, when we commit to one another, when we get married, we are saying, I want to be the best I can be for you. And also, all these things that you are buying, you're getting in on, all these things, and you still want in. So as we work through these things, we just want to say, I know that I have work to do. I do not want to make you pay the price for what someone before you did. Does that make sense? It's kind of simple, but I just want you to have that lens on that you may find yourself doing that. And so let's think about that now. So I want to look at one of the, I'm going to need help from the class again. I didn't bring my manual home. One of the exercises in the manual, actually, I think I can find it and put it up on the screen. Here it is. Well, first I'm going to give some guidelines. So we're going to do an exercise. This is in your homework, but I want to start it tonight. I want us to do some of it tonight. And so, first of all, it's a listening exercise. And what I want us to, the lens I want us to have on beforehand is it's not about being right or wrong. This again is about sharing. We want to resist pointing out how we may have been hurt by these behaviors. So let's say my husband says, I'm always afraid you're going to take something from me. And I say, I know, sorry, I've got some people to let in. 1 second. I can say, I know you have, and it's been really hard for me. And let me tell you why this has been really hard. That's not what this is for.
Can I do it, please?
Sorry.
So there'll be a lot of opportunity for that, but we're not going to do that. We're going to just be listening to the other person. And this is practice. We're going to use these skills in several other classes. So resisting the point of resisting the tendency to point out how you may have been hurt or how you have experienced it. That can be done another time. The goal here is to allow access to your inner life. So as much as you are comfortable sharing with the other something that you have experienced. And again, the most important part about this is to listen. So do your best not to judge or analyze, interject, or fix. We call this no crosstalk in some groups, where we just listen and offer, engagement. We don't want to comment on what the partner feels happened to them or thinks happened to them, knows has happened to them. The goal of this is to know understand, and have more empathy and compassion for one another. You may want to talk about it more later, but for tonight, we're going to stick to listening. Resist imposing your opinions or your views on your partner tonight. And try to find ways to ask questions. So be curious. Remember, I said we'll be curious about the things that we're going to hear about. And then while this may seem stiff at first, we're putting some guardrails on it to help you get the idea of what it's meant to have happen. And you can adjust it as you need to as you go. But we want to create a safe space for each other to be ourselves. If you don't already have that, this is a really good way to do that. We don't want to have to perform or hide in marriage. Okay, if I feel like I have to perform for my spouse, it is going to be a long road. If I have to hide who I am, it's going to be a long road. We don't want to do that. Lastly, we want you to share authentically. And as I just said, in order to share authentically, we need a safe place. So this is something that I know over the years I've had to pray about. And do you know what I have to pray about? My facial expressions. I may have opinions, thoughts, judgments, feelings going on my body language or my facial expressions. And so, I have to pray and I have to say, like I do, Lord, I admit to you now, I do not have the answers for my husband. I may have insight and I may very well be right. I'm pretty sure I am most of the time. That's really annoying to live with. But if we can do this for one another, it's a safe place to be authentic. So think about the ways that if you have ever felt stuck or that you would like to grow or change in, those are the kinds of things we're going to be changing. Notice where you're resistant to the process. If right now in your head you're thinking, this is stupid, I don't want to do this. I don't like this. This isn't, I've never heard of this before. Or if you just think, I'm not ready, notice the resistance. If you're not ready, you're not ready. And you may be in a few days when you've had time to think about it. So do your best tonight, and think about what you learned about how to ask your future spouse what they might need. So when Larry shared that with me, the part where he said, I always feel like you're going to take something from me. That gives me a clue to think about how I can approach him, or we can talk about things where I'm aware that that's happening, that's likely to come up sometimes. So I can be more aware. It helps me know that I can come into a conversation, not abruptly or demanding, but actually say, what would you think about? I can be more gentle that way. So wanting to think about what we might learn. So now I am going to, let's see if I can do this, share the screen. Hold on just a second. Okay, well, can anyone tell me what page it's on in your book? It is called Activity Sharing Your Vows. It's a chart.
It's page 55.
Thank you, Sierra. Page 55 in your manuals. So just going to walk you through these steps really quick. Step number one, you have to decide who will go first. Step number one is, when I was blank, I experienced blank. So you're filling in the blanks here. You're thinking about a time when when there might have been hurt in your life or shame. It might come right to you. You might know it right away. It might take a little bit more. But one of the ways that I tell people, there are two ways actually. One is that the first time you felt shame or something was very hurtful. I mentioned to you, my dad left when I was 6. That's pretty easy. When that happened, I experienced fear, abandonment, whatever it might have been. And the other partner's role is to listen. And then the next thing is, I told myself that meant, so what I thought was that I had to be extra good so that my dad would come back. Because my mom, just being blunt, was a mess. And my brother had lots of trouble. And so I thought he would not want to come back. I thought I could help him to want to come back and see me. So I told myself that it meant that I had to do X, Y, Z. Step 3. So I made a vow to myself that in order to be safe and avoid conflict, belong, or get my needs met, I will never, or I will always. I must never, I must always. And then fill in that blank. The other person still is just listening. When I behave the way my vow tells me to, so let's just say people pleasing for me, I notice that it affects others in this way. They feel indebted to me, or they get overwhelmed by my needing it. I don't know, whatever that is. Others experience me as this, or this is not who I want to be. I want to be. Now, this 4th step is a part of creating a different future for your life, where you start to come to relational things in a different way. And so it's basically saying, who do I want to be? If I always am afraid that someone is going to take something from me or leave me, then what I want to be is someone who is secure in my relationships and knows my value to the person I'm in relationship with, or knows that I have agency in the relationship and that I don't need to be afraid of that anymore. Maybe I did when I was a child. I actually did. but now I have a safe relationship and I can start to change who I am going to be in the future. And of course, this is all done in partnership with God and your personal relationship with Jesus and the way you let him come into these areas for healing. So the step 5 is where it switches. And the person who's just shared will listen, and the person who was listening says, "What I heard you say you experienced is this. I'm sorry that happened to you. Thank you for being open with me about how that has impacted you or us." Okay, so you don't have to use those words. You get there, those are there to give you the idea. That's the extent of your interaction here. And we may only have time for one person to do it tonight, but I want you to at least do that so that as a homework, you can finish up with both people. The last step is to pray. And so partner A, who was listening all along, prays for partner, I'm sorry, partner A prays, "Lord, help me commit to behavior in the place of this vow that will help me grow to the person I want to be and to be more present in my relationship." Again, that's a written prayer. You pray whatever feels right to you. And the other person can pray, "Lord, help me to be a safe space as my partner commits to different behavior." Okay. So you get to do this right now. I'm going to give you maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little less. I'll judge by what I see if you all are there or not. If you want to turn your camera off while you do it, I think that's great. But then turn your camera back on when you're done, and if everybody's done early, then I'll know to start back up. But this is time for you to do this, and then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about your experience. Okay? All right, go. So I want to know if anyone wants to share something that they discovered, ask question, um, think with the group about what it is you are experiencing or wondering. Love some class participation here.
So I can go. I think I've thought about this before, as far as like the first 3 steps, but as far as step 4 goes, when it's how others interpret my behaviors because of the vows, I think that's harder for me to pinpoint and understand like how they do. So I think that's one of the things I have to maybe ask others. You know, when I do this, how does that make you feel? Or does my behavior doing this affect you in any way? And if so, how? Because I'm not really sure exactly how it does.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty brave thing to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's not something we do very often. I feel as if defensiveness is more of a common role in our society, in our culture. And so coming open to suggestions would be a
Yeah.
nice, hopefully they will be, insider suggestions is not as common. Or maybe we've felt that other people have not been safe people. And that wouldn't, I could say to you, a few people I know that would not go well. We do not want to do that conversation. But what the idea, one of the things that is so fascinating to me is that as I do this in a safe space, it gives me more courage to do it in less safe spaces. Because, when I think about what Jesus died for, like all of Christianity is to restore us to our relationship with God and with one another and with ourselves. I've heard it was said that the upward, the inward, and the outward. Those are the things that Jesus came to restore. And so I am not Jesus. I don't know how to do all these things, but as I trust him and walk in these ways, I'm, maybe obedient, maybe just like curious, and I'm just going to have fun and try it, whatever it is. When I join him in that, he comes alongside, and I grow in my confidence in him and what he can do. I grow in healing from the past so that I can be more present to him and to myself and to others in the future. And, one of the things, thank you, Rachel, for sharing. That was helpful. Anybody else before I go on? Anybody else have anything that they are thinking, want to share? Has anyone done this process in any way in the past?
Is it always the case that something happened to you for you to behave a certain way?
Oh,
You
great.
just have a belief that you don't know where it came from or something.
Excellent question, Claudia. Excellent. Um, uh, that is definitely possible. And I would say that could, if there's some strong side to our personality. The only thing is that I would say that it's still very likely that something happened that you don't know about. I mean, again, it may not be that you're protecting yourself from something. You just may be living in the way you think you have to live. Let's say it's that competitive nature, and it's always getting in the way of friendships or family relationships. And nobody ever did anything to you or that you can remember, but you just have always done it. In some way, you believe that that's the best way to be. That's the way to be. And so wonder about where that came from. But I would say that often there is some sort of experience where a person says, this is what I'm going to be like. It could even be like one of the things that I come in contact with a lot is you're so sensitive. Not with me, but I mean, other people say that in their families, they're told that they're too sensitive. Okay, so nothing happened to that person, Claudia, but they heard that message and they said, I'm so sensitive. I'm too sensitive. There's something wrong with me. And then they may not have been shamed about it. It may have just been like, why are you so sensitive? And but then they may take it inward and make it a vow. But that's a great question. And I would say that if you notice something in your way of relating and you don't know where it came from, don't worry so much about that. Or maybe just work that process backwards. I've done this often. Why do I always fill in the blank? Why do I always end up thinking that this is going to happen? And then I think back, I can look back and say, where might that have happened? What did I believe? One of the things that for me was my needs were a burden. And I think a lot of kids feel that way because of, for many reasons. Parents are just really busy. They have a lot on their plates. But mine was tied to a specific thing that happened when I was 6. I didn't think of it until I was 55 years old. Like I never even remembered it until then. But when I did, I thought, there you go. Like I remember deciding I have to not be a burden to anybody ever. And again, it made it hard to have close relationships. So any other thoughts? Anybody else done any of this before? Do you have something that's worked for you? Okay, how about how many people have heard of this idea, have thought about this in the past? Okay, so it's not completely new. Well, remember last week, one of the terms that we had in our glossary of family systems theory was differentiation. And this is one of the ways that we learn to differentiate in relationships. So being differentiated means I am a self, I have a self, I am a person, but I'm also connected to you. Now what that means is that I can say what's so for me. I get to tell you what it's like to be me and who I want to be. Like I can begin to have a preferred future with you, but it is up to me. So if I can never share authentically who I am or what's going on in me or what I'm facing, it's going to be difficult to differentiate because you don't know who I am. And so then the relationship can be kind of one-sided. Now, I will tell you that my husband can barely remember anything in his childhood. Like it drives me nuts. I remember everything and too much. But so he doesn't really have a lot of that line of thinking. He knows decisions he made. He knows things he didn't like. But remembering things, not so much. So we don't want to press or, try and pull things out of each other. We just want to be a safe place and be able to share authentically. And so I would like to say that I am sure that all of you have done that to your knowledge, to the best of your ability. The place where this comes in is if you are getting stuck a lot. If you're seeing, my husband and I call it a dance. If you're seeing something you argue about kind of on a regular basis, or it comes around, maybe you've never had an argument. That would even be a better way to approach this. Why have you not ever had a disagreement? We don't even have to call them arguments, disagreements. And how do you show up when you don't feel understood or when you feel like hurt or not listened to? Those are the times you want to think about this. And again, your awareness is, wow, I always say to myself, that was quite a tantrum you just threw, Kelly. Even if it was just in my head, like, oh, there was something happened there. What was that about? And then I don't even have to say it out loud, but I can work on it and take it to God and say, is this something that we need to look at? And he may say, nah, you're fine. Well, he doesn't talk to me like that, but I may sense that there's really nothing right now and I can move on. But there also may be things you want to think about. So, anything else? Has anyone thought of anything else?
I feel like we just kind of slid through this one kind of quick. Both of us have been married before, and so some of these things seem like we're kind of like in a pattern of at least making better choices now because we made bad choices before. So a lot of these things seem like, oh wow, I learned that one, back at that time, but now it's really good to see how it could work right when you have these tools in the beginning. So it's like, we've already began being open and talking to each other like this, and it's like whoa, somebody's got this written down. So I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
So
after my first marriage, I did this thing called, have you heard of sozo prayer? Like soaking prayer. or giving
Sozo.
prayer? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they take you through this when you do that prayer where you like break vows that you've made, whether it's in childhood or other times. And it helps because there's like a spiritual connection when you make a vow, because we speak creation, like we speak into creation. We say, I'm never going to do this, or I won't do this, or I am something. It creates in our life. So if you break the vow, then the power that Satan has over it can be broken, and God can come in and restore and heal that. And so that's really helpful. And I think this is really great because it helps to, like, the little list that was over here on page 53, where it says these different things, and if you feel like for me, if I'm in a conversation or, you know, a situation and I feel myself getting like upset or triggered, I know that word's like used all the time right now,
Yeah.
but triggered in some
It's
way.
good.
And yeah, and then I can be like, okay, I'm, you know, what's happening in me? Like, it's not necessarily like my child or my partner that's making me feel something, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I feel something because something's inside of me. And then I can look at, you know, where did that come from and really pray about it, because I feel like sometimes people dig for things where you don't really need to dig. It's going to come up. If God wants to show you it, it'll reveal itself, you know?
Ah,
That's been my experience.
well, thank you so much, Shelley. Yeah, that's another example of a place you might have heard or done this kind of work. I think it's really important to stay clear on how these when, like Shelley mentioned the word triggered or stirred up, when you get stirred up and you don't know why, it's really important to take that to God first. But the idea that if God, the only thing I would say another way is that, well, if God wants me to work on it, he'll let me know. That I have not always seen to be the case. In other words, my sensitivity to God may not be what someone else's is. And so I would say that if something is coming up in my relationship with someone else, I need to consider that as God speaking to me. Now, it may not be me that needs to change, but I do definitely want to look at it from that perspective. And you know, this sounds like a lot of work. I'm sure Shelley, she talked about her first marriage, and I'm sure it almost sounded kind of like, you know, the first time I tried to swim or something. You know, I'm sure it was painful. I'm sure it was hard, and there was a lot that you went through. And so when we think about, now, some of you may not have been married before, but you may have been in long-term relationships or cohabiting relationships. The thing we want to think about is, am I afraid of those things happening again? You know, am I looking to protect, to keep it from happening? And that's not a way to be authentic, or free, you know, to have freedom in our lives. So very good. I just wonder, did anyone, you don't have to share, but did anyone have resistance to this? Not want to do it? No? Okay. Great. Great. I would even like you to think about, for homework, what you, maybe writing a little note down of what you learned, if anything, about your dating partner or fiance. Something you learned about them that you didn't know. And again, if you weren't able to finish in this 10 minutes, because this could be a lot longer conversation, finish it. Do finish. It's one of the most important things we're going to do. Okay. Not really moving along, but the next homework that I want to look at is self-protective vows, the worksheet sensitive to criticism. And I found my manual. It is on page
56.
Thank you. Okay, page 56. So, sensitive to criticism, the statement that we're going to be thinking about is, are you sensitive to criticism? And we have an inventory that we offer through Marriage and Family that was created at Vineyard Columbus. And one of the questions in the inventory, one of the things we ask couples to respond to is, to answer agree or disagree. I am sensitive to criticism. My future spouse or dating partner is sensitive to criticism. So each of you are answering that, and then the answers get put together and you see agreement. So for instance, if I said that I'm not sensitive to criticism, and my husband says that I am, what might that mean? You think if he thinks I'm sensitive to criticism and I say, no, I'm not. Not at all. I'm always improving myself. I'm always looking for ways to get better. That's not true. So what might that say? And so one of the reasons that we have this in here is so that you can self-examine in this way. The first part of it says, if yes, how does your being sensitive to criticism affect your relationship in a negative way? You get to reflect on this. This is on your own, by the way. You each have this form. You're not necessarily talking as you do this. The next one is your partner sensitive to criticism, yes or no? And so if yes, how does your partner being sensitive to criticism affect your relationship in a negative way? So you get to think through what happens when someone becomes sensitive to criticism or defensive. We all have defense mechanisms. Some of them are easy to live with and mild, others are very uncomfortable and unpleasant to live with. So, but we also have here, if no, if, 57, Claudia, page 57. Is that right? Somebody told me, yeah. So, if no, how does not being sensitive to criticism affect your relationship positively? So see, we're not thinking everybody is sensitive to criticism. We're saying, well, maybe you're not. And maybe that really brings some beautiful thing into your relationship, some kind of freedom. If no, how does your partner not being sensitive to criticism affect your relationship positively? Again, we are not like trying to turn stones over and find every little thing. We want to be able to say, the way that you are blesses me because, for Charlie and Jason, they may have had someone before that was very sensitive to criticism, and now they have someone who's not.
So
What?
one quick question. So the word criticism, I mean, we're talking about this kind of going, I mean, there's something called feedback.
Yeah,
We
that's
can
great.
give to each other in a loving way. But criticism in terms of, I just think of in that word, it sounds very negative. I feel like none of us should be really truly criticizing anybody, even when Jesus, if he disciplines us, he disciplines us in love, and we should do that with each other as well. But, we can give feedback, and the feedback can be sometimes hard to hear. And if that's what you mean by criticism, then I'll take, we'll go that route.
Okay, that's great, Jason. It's really good. I actually I do always mention that critical spirit is a different thing.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. I may even add the word feedback / criticism to this. But what we tend to do is come into, if we come in, I shouldn't say we tend to do, if we come into a situation with the idea that the other person should do something different, shouldn't do what they did, doesn't take responsibility, whatever it is, you call feedback, the way that we say it can be everything. And I call it tone. I actually have a cartoon I usually put up. It says, like, everything, all of disagreements in marriage can be boiled down to tone. The way I say something, or the volume with which I say something. You can change the way that you bring something to your partner very much by your tone and your posture. So I think that's what Jason is saying. To be sensitive to criticism could also mean, Shelley and Jason, I actually have had this experience where feedback, positive supportive feedback is even taken as criticism because the person is sensitive to criticism. And this could be a way for you to see into a pattern or a past that created that in you. If that, obviously, if you have that. So, so if someone says something to me, I may be defensive, but I may not be as sensitive to it as they are, or vice versa. And if you, I actually want you guys to do this for about maybe 5 minutes now. Go ahead and answer. And again, these are yes or no's or agree or disagree. And then if you want to write something down, but then share your answers with each other. Now, here's the thing. If one of you says the other is sensitive to criticism and you don't think you are, you know, put a pin in it and talk through it later. We're not going to necessarily do this, but remember, what someone else thinks of you or how they see you may not be 100% accurate. But if I can be curious about, well, okay, I wonder why they think that. What would it be about them? And again, it doesn't mean that you're wrong or that what they're saying is true. It means you want to be curious about what makes them say that. If you already know and you know it's not valid, that's a whole different thing. But I always give the example too. When my husband and I first took the inventory I mentioned, there's a question also. I'm a good listener. My fiance, my husband is a good listener. And so I listen for a living. I've been listening to people my entire life. I said I was a good listener. My husband said I wasn't a good listener. Okay, so immediately what I wanted to say was, what are you talking? How, like, no one has ever said that about me. I mean, I've always only heard the other. But instead, thankfully, thanks to God and some of my training, I thought to myself, why would he say that? Wonder what he meant when he said that. And so I asked him, honey, why did you say I wasn't a good listener? And he said, well, you're always doing 3 things at once. I never feel like I have your full attention. And I knew immediately that he's right. He was right. Now, if it was something really important, like we would sit down and talk, he would have my attention. But on a daily basis, most of the time, I was always on the move. We have that maybe flipped relationship where I always want to get things done and he always wants to talk. And it's amazing. It has been amazing having a husband who wants to go deep, who wants to talk about things. But I want to get things done. And it was always something that came between us. So I was able to say to him, okay, I hear you. And by the way, this was before cell phones. Can you imagine how bad it is now? I mean, I have to really work to give him my attention when I'm doing something else. So, but I was able to say, well, what would you like how could I make it better? And he said, put the mail down. Don't be going through the mail while we're talking. Stop loading the dishwasher. Look me in the eye. And so, we had a few back and forths. It was like, well, okay, I need to be more present to that he has priority and I need to give priority to our conversations. He also needs to be aware when things need to get done. Because I think one time when he called me on it, like we had company coming over and he was in this deep conversation and I was like, we gotta go, so I said, okay, I want to do that. That is what we are going to do. And if there's a time crunch, we'll have to do it later. And he said, well, yeah, of course, which he did mean, but he actually has a hard time stopping sometimes. So, that was criticism of me, feedback because of the inventory. The inventory gave us the ability to talk about it. But I was sensitive in the beginning because it's one of my strengths, right? Like I feel like it's one of the things that's really good about me. And he was saying it's not. But then this kind of a worksheet helps me to say, okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna reserve my reaction and I'm going to listen to what he feels or thinks. And even then, I could have said, that's not true. I don't do that. Anybody? Like, has anyone ever said that to you or you've said that to someone? And so that's what I mean when I say take responsibility. I want to take responsibility for what is mine. And if I listen and I still feel that they are being critical in the way that Jason mentioned, then I can say, I don't really think that this is what's happening. This is what I feel is happening. Then you go into a deeper level of conflict resolution. But sometimes it's not even necessary if I will do the self-examination that I need to do. It's not necessary to go into a full-blown conflict. I just say, yeah, I get too focused on getting things done. And I want to slow down in our relationship. And he might have, I might say to him, honey, the stories you tell me are kind of long sometimes. And like he might be telling me about how he put the motor back together in the car, and I'm just like coming kind of, like my brain doesn't do that. But for him, it's exhilarating and it's exciting and, and it means a lot. And so I can say, can you kind of, and then he can say, yeah. Like, okay, yeah, all right. I don't need to tell you how the spark plugs fit into the carburetor, whatever. I know there's no carburetors anymore, by the way. I can tell you that. All right. So let's take 5 or 10 minutes, see how this goes for you. Most of this is to kind of whet your appetite to see if it's something that you want to do more of in your relationship or if you've got it, if you're good. So 10 minutes for this, and then we'll come back and finish up. Okay? Mine was off. No wonder people aren't coming back. You'd think after 4 years of doing these online calls, I would have this figured out. I was just realizing today that it was 4 years ago that we had the shutdown, just under 4 years ago. And we just finished the winter class, and then in the spring we had to shift to doing it online for the first time. Anyway, here we are. It ended up being a good thing. All right. So does anyone want to share, or this may be a more private thing, but any questions that you have? I really appreciated Shelley and Jason's questions. Their thoughts about it before. Anything anyone's wondering or you want to share?
Do you want to say it?
You could say it if you want.
Maybe.
For those of us who have different ways of like making things right in regards to criticism, like for instance, for Claudia, it's like if it's something that I'm frustrated about that she doesn't see anything can be really done about it, like a specific type of disappointment or something, she's like, what do I do? And for me, it's like I get hurt when I'll have to dig deeper on that. I know Claudia and I both agree that we love very easily.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So when Claudia doesn't see what you're pointing out or doesn't understand, doesn't know how to make it better, your feelings get hurt?
Her feelings gets hurt. Like
Yeah.
She responds negatively to it.
Yeah.
If it's just criticism, then it's like there's no way of getting better from it. I don't see the point of criticizing.
Well, and that's kind of what Shelley and Jason were saying. So feedback, so again, if Ian was to, in a very kind way, ask you about why you did something, it would be different than if he got really frustrated and said, "Why do you do that?" Do you see the difference?
Yeah,
Or would that make a difference for you? Maybe I should ask.
I think it would make a difference. Like if it's made to one situation that you could do differently rather than always going into a pattern like you always do this. It's like
Ooh,
I
good
can't fix
point.
everything, but I could
Good-
do it different next time for that one thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Claudia. The words always and never are good.
Always don't speak to each other in absolutes. That always just cuts things off really quick because it just makes you defensive. Well, what do you
Yeah.
mean always do that? I don't do that, and then they're done. They just close
Yeah.
off.
So again, Jason, like the thing is that if I grew up in a home where that was what was done, I might not think there's anything wrong with it. Or I may have hated it, and then it is a trigger for me. So yeah, Claudia and Ian, I want to answer something for you. So, so one of the things about that always and never is that that's another thing where I need to take responsibility and say, if I'm the one that's criticizing, I need to say, why is this so important to me? Or is this something that Claudia really needs to change? Or is there something going on here? So that's important. But also, I would say that if feedback hurts your feelings, do your best to kind of offload that to God in the moment. And ask, kind of like I did with my husband, saying that, I'm always doing 3 things when he talks to me. Well, that was like, I didn't like hearing that, but I could say, okay, well, what about this is true and how can I do this? So, but I really do think that, that this kind of goes into something I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So I'm just going to wait and say a little bit more. There's another homework assignment that I'm going to talk about, but that's a great question. And I will say it again, always and never are like fighting words. I mean, think about it. Is it always? And is it never? Not often. And we really want to bring that grace to our relationships, to our marriages. We want there to be grace to believe the best. And to care, not to like, well, anyway, I'm sure that's where you guys are. So, anything else?
I think something that we talked about, like when it comes to criticism, everybody is correct, like tone, how it's approached and everything. But when it does start to escalate, or in general, if it starts to escalate, something we recognize is that we have 2 different attachment styles. So like I'm anxious attachment and he's more anxious avoidant. So like setting up those like boundaries or setting up the conversation as a whole is really important. Like I was like, don't come, I'm more self-critical. I don't like criticism. So like if somebody were to like suddenly say something critical to me out of nowhere, I start to get a bit of that anxious attachment style behavior, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. And so just setting up the situation, we talked about maybe like setting up the situation where we can have a discussion and sort of set those boundaries just beforehand, like in a calmer setting, or maybe just before bed, or during a nice dinner, instead of just like walking in and saying, "Hey, you didn't do the dishes today." It's like, like things like that sort of help get the message across without like um, feeling attacked or pressure. It's just that I threw out there. We discussed it
Yeah,
together.
Sierra, can I just ask a question while you're there? When you say your attachment style is anxious, so when someone criticizes you, how does that manifest an anxious attachment style?
I guess I think it varies from person to person, but for me personally, like I start getting like closer and asking more questions and like trying to like avoid any space, or like no, we must stand here in front of each other like 3 inches apart until we can come to a solution, or like you'll leave forever, like, and he's literally going to the bathroom and I'm like, he's gonna leave forever, and it's so sad. And so like that makes him anxious. So instead he'll be like, hey, like, and maybe we can just sit down on the couch and just have this full conversation.
There you go. That's great. I'm glad you explained that, because I didn't want to assume I knew what you meant, but also it's a great example of how you can begin to change the reaction, the trigger when Ruben is safer. Oops. The more often that you feel that safety, the less you will be maybe anxious in your response to it. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? There are lots of things out there in the psychology world and the spiritual world. And we heard about sozo prayer. We heard about attachment styles. There's a lot of really great stuff out there. And it can help us, whatever it takes for you to become self-aware and be able to say, yeah, this is me and I have work to do. It's okay. Or maybe it's even more. Maybe it's like, this is something that I don't know if I can live with. And we would call those non-negotiables. So segue into the next homework assignment. Again, Shelley and Jason pointed out, don't like the word criticism, feedback. Well, non-negotiables is probably something that we can think of a better word for, but let me see. This is on page 59. And so we go to page 59. And one of the things you'll notice there, the things I like to point out, I want you guys to think about it yourselves, but when it comes to our lives, there are things that we believe need to be there, like we have to have, or that we will not allow, we won't have any part of in our lives. And so sometimes those come from self-protective vows. Sometimes those things come from the things that we have struggled in. And so here's some possible things that could be what you might call non-negotiable in your mind. So it could be roles in marriage, parenting styles, career, and that would mean like hours that you work, how much travel, integrity, whether you spend time with too much time with other people, family involvement, like your family of origin, how much time they want you to be with them, or don't want you to be with them. I don't know. Social activities. The one that comes under here that I always think about, that I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but for many years when video games first became popular, it began to be people would get married not having any idea how much time the other person played video games. And that's kind of a huge awakening. And so then you can see the friction that can start there. So, what are your feelings about that? Be able to talk about it. Vacations, communication, physical intimacy, discretionary time. Again, TV, computer, video games, gambling, Facebook, golf, I don't know, soccer, like whatever it is, what are your values? And so what we want you to do is, if you feel like there's something that is really, really important that you cannot tolerate in your life, in your home, in your marriage, you want to tie it to a value before bringing it up. Or maybe you've brought it up and you never tied it to a value. You can see if you can do that now. So again, some may be from self-protective vows, like if you grew up in an alcoholic home and you don't want alcohol in your home, and the other person, thinks it's okay. How can you come together on that? How can you find a center ground? And we're not going to go into lots of examples tonight, but finances, maybe you are a spender and the other person is a saver. That's a real generalization, but and like maybe no debt. That's probably more of what a non-negotiable would be. We will never have any credit card debt. And the other person thinks, well, it's okay. If we don't let it get out of hand, it's fine. And so, but what is your value behind it? Be able to communicate your value. And what about it makes you anxious or afraid, or what judgments you have about that thing, so that you can talk about it and maybe draw boundaries together. So again, the value is the part that I want to point out here. Our shared values are the glue that keep marriages together. Friendship and shared values, usually that's what they come together on. And so, when you're listening to me and you're thinking, well, like I'm a homebody. I'm an introvert. I don't really like going out all the time, but my fiance really loves to go out. How can it be okay for me to let them be them and me be me? Or can't I? One time a couple came in. The woman was a dance major. She loved to dance. It was, and her friends, she and her friends would go out dancing all the time before she met this person. And as they got more deeply into their relationship and more committed, he began to express to her how uncomfortable he felt when she went out to clubs with other girls. And she felt completely legitimate in it. She wasn't meeting men or talking to men. She just had this sense like he was judging her, or he was misunderstanding. I mean, they just were going back and forth, back and forth. And then the next time they came in to talk with me, they said they had found a resolution to it. He agreed to, or he had the idea that they could take dance lessons together, like ballroom dance lessons, and that they would go out and do that regularly. Well, I don't know that I would have ever thought of that or suggested it, but them doing this process was what helped them to think through what could be a way that it could be okay. So her value and her love of dance, he was asking her to give it up. And he realized that in the end, but mainly what he thought was that she didn't care about how it made him feel, which was that she could possibly be drawn into a relationship with another man. So they both had a value. Hers was to do what she felt like she was created to do. His was that she was safe, that they were safe, and they both worked on that. They both came together on that. So non-negotiables, if you think about it, you may want to think about what kind of boundaries you can put in place so that you can feel safe entering into a relationship with someone who has very different values. But we are not talking necessarily about whether you put your clothes in the hamper, if you chew with your mouth open. If you don't like to, you like to go to bed with the TV on, I don't know that these are non-negotiables. I guess I just want to kind of clear up what we have preferences and likes and dislikes. Non-negotiables will be tied to values. Okay. Any questions for me on that? No. Okay. All right. Well, we have just a couple of minutes, and something I wanted to do was have you go to the table of contents. So that's on page 5 of your book. And I mentioned to you that we were going to have a couple this week. The couple that was supposed to be with us, the woman was sick, and so they weren't able to do it. Seems like everybody has something these days. But I was really disappointed in that. But I wanted to tell you that these are not in order, but we are going to have some with us next week. Yeah, next week to talk about marriage covenant. We're going to have a couple with us, unless they're sick. They're actually on a vacation right now. So who knows, right? When you get home. So we're going to talk about marriage covenant, and there's actually an email coming out tomorrow that will have some videos for you to watch from a premarital course called Alpha Us. And in that, we got some Alpha fans here. In that there's a couple that talk about the idea of covenant and commitment. There's also love languages and sexual life together. So this is going to, we're going to shift away from the shared identity, self-protective vows, and we're going to look more into like what married life means, the biblical values of it, and also some more fun things. So then we actually have confession, repentance, and forgiveness, which I hope that you all will be thinking about. I like to kind of preface these. Then the last two are finances in marriage and conflict resolution. And so we're going to talk about finances. That always seems to be a really lively discussion. But also conflict resolution. Some of the things we talked about tonight, we're going to tie together with some skills, some active listening things and that kind of thing in the end. And I hope that one of our couples will be able to be with us for that as well. But we'll see. We will see on that. So I just wanted you to know where we're going and to be thinking ahead. So if there's nothing else, any other questions? Give one last time. Okay. I will pray for us now, and then we will see each other again next week. So, Father, I thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be thinking about our lives with you in this way. That each person on the call tonight would know and understand your heart for them as your son or daughter and as a couple. That their marriage would draw them closer to one another and closer to you, Lord, through these processes. Lord, would you bless each person? I pray your hand of protection over any sensitive or tender areas, Lord, that might come up. Would you give each person grace to know that for the rest of their lives together, they will be bringing things to you, bringing things to one another, and learning to love in a new way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, everyone. You can unmute and say goodbye.
Good night.
Night, everybody.